Welcome back to Awaken and Ascend. I'm Jennifer Regular, the host, where I get to bring in incredible individuals from all around the world who are feeling the call into a huge shift, a huge collective transformation that we're being called in to accept our full sacred responsibility for. And we're meant to be doing that together. And so I love bringing in people from all around the world where we get to walk the path together and share some insights and revelations and support each other in this way. And you, as the audience, that I am so grateful for you attending this, can also participate with your comments, your questions. So be sure to put that below as well. Today, I'm proud to welcome back James Kawainui, who comes from a lineage of Kahuna that can be traced back in old Hawaii over 20 generations. James blends neuroscience-informed methods with indigenous teachings, guiding people to repattern generational behaviors, overcome trauma, and actually live in harmony with their true nature. He was on the show a few months ago talking about oponopono and giving new insight into what it's truly about, what the deeper roots and essence of it is. And today he's back to share about those next steps and to bring in unpacking the boundaries, the awareness, the patterns and addictions and mindful practices that we only touched the surface on last time. So, James, welcome back. I am so grateful that you're here and that we get to unpack a little bit more. Welcome
I
back.
I I love hanging out with you, Jennifer. So
It is a lot of fun.
it is.
It is a lot of fun. Now, we talked about your lineage being Hawaiian, but you're actually living in Arizona now. Is that correct?
I live about 20 minutes outside of Sedona, and it's been part of the journey over the few years. Um, when I got told to move up to the what the Hawaiians call the mainland,
Hmm.
um, I actually had just come back from living in New Zealand.
Oh,
And I had every intention of living in New Zealand for the rest of my life. I had just gotten full residency and was on my way to becoming a citizen. And I got a call from my mom said, you need to come back to Hawaii. And I was very resistant. And I took a few months. I actually did a retreat, a self retreat where I went into isolation for a few days to really get clear about the answers. I was looking at the ancestors going, okay, I really need some help here and some guidance. And once I went through my process and the human side and that control freak finally let go, and they were able to step in. They showed me that going back home was important. So I went back home, and that was when I went to a family reunion where I learned my lineage. It was a woman had reached out to my mom and said, I think we're related. And she showed her how they were related. And she says, I've been doing this genealogy research for over 10 years, and I'm getting ready to have a family reunion. And I've managed to contact 600 people that said that they wanted to come to this family reunion. And she said, "You guys, your line and your family broke off 2 generations ago, and I think it's time to bring you back in and let you know who you are." And so, when my mom told me that, which is the reason why she wanted me to come home, and I realized that I needed that was an important piece. So I came home thinking I was only going to be back in Hawaii for about 3 months, and then I was going to fly back to New Zealand, and I was going to be there. And I got home and I got handed the book, and it was this act of being able to see your ancestors on page like that that really clicked something inside and said, oh, this is, and I remember thinking to myself, this is who you are.
this is who you are.
And
Yeah.
and then the kupuna, the ancestors, a few days later went, great. Now that you know who you are, you can't go back to New Zealand. You have to move to the mainland. And I was like, why? And they said, because the people that are looking for you are not going to be able to find you. if you move back to New Zealand or if you stay in Hawaii. And it's true because people find me all the time on the internet, and they go, and some of them are disappointed when they find out I'm not in Hawaii. I said, look, if I was in Hawaii, you would never have found me in the first place.
Mm.
Because in Hawaii, it's very old school in that way where the people that are doing the healing work, and we find this in indigenous cultures a lot, is that they're not standing up going, "Hey, here I am." You need anything? You need some guidance or help? I'm over here, And so, and I laugh because I say this, and it's a kind of a joke, and it's not. The person, you have a friend of the person that knows the cousin that has the uncle that does the work. That's
Mm.
kind of how it works in Hawaii, right? So there you got to go through about 4 or 5 tiers sometimes to get to that
Mm.
person, and the Kapuna, the ancestors realized that in some ways to speed up the process or to be more available. One of the things that they said to me was, you have to think more. What they said was, your community is global, not local.
Yes.
And so it was shifting that viewpoint inside of that, and said, so moving to the mainland is part of that global thinking process, you know. So I resisted for a few months, and then I finally showed up, and that was 15 years ago that I moved up here. So it's been that process of that.
I find that's what often happens is that we end up where we need to be, doing what we need to be doing, and being able to accept into that challenge. And what can get a little tricky sometimes is those boundaries, because then if we're pulled in different directions, if we want to be available to people, how do we find the right container for that where we don't end up losing ourselves, but that we remain intact and keep our spirit intact with who we're meant to be and the work we're meant to be doing? How do we not get fragmented when we're moving around or constantly being on and available to people, James? How do we set those energetic boundaries, if you will?
Yeah, that's a really good question, to ask that because that's one of the things, most people don't know this about me, but I would say 2/3 of the people that I work with are other practitioners.
Mm.
And I was given that responsibility early on when I first started doing this work. These people kept showing up, and I kept asking them what they're doing, and I started finding out that most of them were practitioners. And again, the Kupuna is saying your responsibility is to make sure that the practitioners stay healthy so they could do their work. And I was like,
That's right.
okay, one more thing that you guys are putting me in charge of. Got it. And so I started doing that. And there's some fundamental pieces that I found over the years of working with practitioners. People too. I mean, and I'm not going to say regular people, but people as well, non-practitioners, right?
Mm.
Is that we have some inherent pieces that we don't pay attention to. One is we have no idea what clear energetic boundaries are.
Mhm.
And so because of that, there's this confusion when we feel, or if we're looking at some emotion that we're going through or anything else like that, there's not a way of being able to discern if what I'm actually feeling is me.
Right.
And I just had a conversation with somebody this morning about that, where she has, her we're talking about someone that she's been working with, and they feel like they're scattered and all over the place. And they said, "Oh my God, I don't feel safe in the world,"
Mm.
and not feeling safe because there's a place where it just feels overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
And over the overwhelming is, and so one of the first things I do with people when they come to Murray, this is like foundational pieces, is we create energetic boundaries so that you really get a clear sense of the self, that's you, and what is around you and what you may be feeling that's not yours,
Hmm. Hmm.
without that, then it's always going to feel inundating, and most people, the way that they comment is that I don't feel safe in the world. Well, if I heard the thought processes of all the people that are around me constantly every day, who wouldn't go crazy?
Yeah.
Who wouldn't
Who
go crazy?
wouldn't?
And if you look at where we are, the level of stress and the level of anxiety that we're going through, having to remember that we literally all are connected. There is this connected energy. And so the understanding that there is a collective consciousness, there's a collective energy, there's a collective emotion that's happening. And people say, well, how is that true? And I said, well, you ever been to a sporting event? Or you ever been, right? And you're in a stadium with thousands of people, or gone to a concert, right? Like a rock concert, or even to the symphony or anywhere else like that. You walk into the space, and as the emotion of the room changes, like somebody scores a goal, or a touchdown, or whatever it is, you're in a hockey rink, and your guy gets checked, and everybody's yelling because they're angry because the referee doesn't say anything. That's collective energy.
Yeah.
There it is. You're moving with the wave of emotion that's happening inside of the collective.
That's right. That's right. And it's even more subtle than that as well. Like when you're in a grocery store, for example, and they're playing the overhead music, you're not really paying attention to that. You're doing your shopping, going through the list, getting annoyed with the person that's standing in front of you and you can't get past them, or waiting too long in line. But then you come out of the store and suddenly you have a song stuck in your head. Where did that come from? But somehow it got inside you. And it's playing
Yeah.
in your mind now, literally, right? And we can think of that very figuratively too. What's playing in our mind now? What did we pick up on? What did we take in without even actually realizing it?
Without realizing, and that's
Yeah.
the key, without realizing what's going
Mm-hmm.
on. We
Mm-hmm.
pull those things into, so that it gets to a point where it's so seamless
Yeah.
that slowly, as we go through our life, unless you're very aware of what's going on, you lose your sense of self.
Yeah. We lose our sense of self. And some of us, like a very clear boundary is our bodies, right? Our physical body. And many of us don't feel safe in that and don't want to inhabit this body, this constriction, this restriction, or feel very uncomfortable being in it, that we leave our bodies or will bypass anything that, disturbs our sense of peace, the love light that permeates the earth, and we don't want to poo-poo on that idea, but to understand what it really means to embody peace, love, and light, and not just talk about it or live on the surface of that and bypass anything that may seem not that. Because when we get into real talk about healing and transformation, we've seen, experienced, and observed that it's not pretty. It can get very messy. And we want to
Oh,
be present and alive for that. We want to become aware of that so that we can shift with it in a good way.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's, you bring up a really good point, and that is really the body is kind of directing where we go in our lives. It
Yeah.
is.
Mm-hmm.
And the body is holding the emotion, is holding the energy of what's going on. But we keep trying to do that as in some ways a conceptual mental process.
Mm.
And that's just that process of thinking that everything's mental, it literally pulls you out of your physical body.
Mm.
And so, in order to really live as an embodied human being, you have to really be aware of the physical form and what it's holding and what it's carrying. And so, part of the boundaries is actually, wow. I mean, just for an example, so just if we were to just say to everybody right now,
Mm.
so if you
Mm-hmm.
close your eyes, right,
Mm.
and you just think of the word happiness. I don't want you to think about the word happiness. What I want to do is, can you reach into your physical form, into your body, and notice
Mm-hmm.
the energy that the body holds for happiness,
Yeah.
right? And then do the same thing for fear. And notice what happens. And I think there's enough of an awareness that people would see that there was this slight contraction inside your field. And the more we are in tune with that, the more we'll start to be in tune with the world around us. And so that's part of it. And you're right. There's so many different levels inside of this, but one of the levels is that we come from light. We
Mm-hmm.
come, we incarnate into a physical form, but we are light beings that incarnate into a physical form, which means that in the physical form, there are no restrictions. We move as we want to move.
Yeah.
We can do the things that we need to do. And all of a sudden, a soul incarnates into a physical body and they kind of go, what is that? And because the body feels so dense, and so there's consciousness inside of a physical form, and there you have it's really an interesting thing to watch how many people, and I've watched people at every age group from teens to the 80s or 90s, and of people that still have not decided that being in a physical form was good, was okay for them to be. And so, and if you're looking at trauma in that way, anytime there's very serious trauma, the first thing that we do is we disassociate and we pull out.
Yeah.
It's a survival technique
Yeah.
that happens. And
Mhm.
so if we're constantly pulling ourselves out, here's my question to most of you. Have you fully come back in?
Mhm.
And the answer most of the time is not really.
No, and that leaves us so vulnerable then as well,
Not
which
not just
it's the opposite of what we want.
well,
Yeah.
not just vulnerable, but actually fractured. And so it's
Fractured.
like the personality or the
Hmm.
soul who that is. And I've seen this in a lot in trauma when I work with people with trauma,
Hmm.
where there are pieces that are left in all the traumatic events that are happening, and so there is not the soul isn't whole.
That's right.
And so when they talk about doing soul retrievals,
Which
that
is
kind of thing,
something I do in my shamanic training. Yes.
that's deep work when we're doing that because
Yes.
we're traveling with people through time or dimensions
Yes.
to bring people back into that space and bring pieces of themselves back so that they can actually understand who they are.
Yeah.
And by doing that, releasing the trauma because now that part of them that was attached to the trauma is not there anymore. You
Yeah.
know?
Is what Sandra Ingerman calls the welcome home work as well,
Mhm.
and part of the soul remembrance, life after healing. What does that look like? And it's something actually that we want and fear at the same time is life after healing. We see that in recovery from addictions a lot, and any kind of addictive pattern that we have in our life. And when you mention about close your eyes and think about fear for a moment, what that's like, and you spoke about contraction, for me, that contraction showed up as like a little bit withdrawal and then a shakiness. And
That's
I know
exactly it.
that when we're shaken up, you know, then it's an uncomfortable feeling. But then that's when I think we're more prone to wanting to control
Hmm.
something and where the addictive patterns stay in an addictive loop, right? In the cycle for that sense of safety. Is it really safety and control? And so you mentioned about not always living in the brain. When we think neuroscience, there is that brain piece. So, how do you bring in that neuroscientific methods to help us break those patterns of behavior and addictions and trauma?
I think first of all, you have to recognize where the patterns and the behaviors are coming from, especially
Okay.
the traumatic ones,
Mm,
right?
mm-hmm,
And for all intents and purposes, they're coming from an automated part of your brain. So they're coming from the amygdala and they're coming from the hypothalamus
mm,
because that's where the automatic responses are. So when we're running patterns and inside of addiction where or wherever it is, and I'm not talking about physical addiction, I'm talking about mostly most emotional addictions
mm-hmm,
that we're talking about.
mm-hmm,
There's a pattern and a loop that's playing in your head. So what's happened from that neuroscience standpoint is it's bypassed the thinking part of your brain, which is your frontal cortex, right? Which is the processing part of your brain. And it's running from that old part of your brain, which is the amygdala, and part of that is the amygdala and the hypothalamus. And so in for me, doing work with addiction is pulling people out of the loop and one of the ways that you pull people out of the loop, or part of the way that that I do that, is that by bringing them back into their body, so that they're watching what the effects of the loop or the programming or the emotion that's running is having on their body, just like you felt the pullback and the contraction, right?
mm-hmm,
And to notice that and go, oh, wait a minute, my body's reacting to something that I'm thinking about. Am I in the present moment? And you realize, oh no, I'm not. I'm staring, I'm looking at Jennifer, but there's a thought that's running in my head, so I'm there, wherever that
yeah.
is. And it
Mm,
could be Could be yesterday, it could be last week, it could be 40 years from now, 40 years ago, it could be when I was a child and I was 5 and something happened,
Mm.
right? The brain doesn't understand time, so the brain just runs that scenario over and over and over again. And even though I might be 50, I'm still playing that 5-year-old loop that's there. And so
Mhm.
it's recognizing that the loop is playing and going, oh, wait a minute, I'm running a pattern. In this moment, when I'm running a pattern, in all likelihood, you're not present inside your body. And so it's stopping in that moment. They're just going, whoa, wait a minute. And so when people say stop, take a breath, this is really what you're talking about. It's like
Mm.
stop, take a breath, feel your breath, and just go, oh, wow, there's my breath. I feel it going in my body. I feel it going out. Oh, here I am, James, sitting in a chair in the room, looking at Jennifer,
Mm.
all present moment things. And
Mhm.
every time we do that, what we're doing is we're interrupting that, interrupting it, interrupting it. We're pulling it back here. We're pulling it to the part of the brain that can go, oh, right, I'm doing this thing. What do I need to do about that? And so,
Mm.
yes, we do use the brain and we do use the neuroscience or the neuropathic, connections. But the thing about it is that where it lands is the emotions and the feelings that we have in our body. So that's the connection. So everybody stays here, but they don't bring it down
Mm. Mhm. And so instead of pulling ourselves out of our body, we want to pull ourselves out of the loop.
out of the
Out
loop.
of the loop to recognize that, right? And to see what's actually
Because,
happening. Yeah.
yeah, because those thoughts are obsessive. They
Mm-hmm.
are. They're really
Mm-hmm.
obsessive. And then once they become obsessives like that, they disappear from our everyday consciousness.
Mm.
And so people talking about wanting to change their lives and wanting to shift and wanting to live beautiful lives or happy or to be in a beautiful place inside of their lives. And yet their thinking isn't aligned with what they're wanting in their lives.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? What pulls us out of that alignment?
Survival.
Yeah. And that's why there's so many people talking about moving from survival into thriving, right? And
Because that survival, because we have to remember that, and this is for everything. This is all living things, plants, animals, humans, wherever. We have a survival gene, we have a survival instinct that says, I mean, a, 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 a seed gets stuck in a crevice, in a cliff.
mm,
And yet the drive to survive in that seed, in the side of that cliff is so deep that it takes root, and the roots take hold, and the roots go deeper, and the tree survives in an environment that would be absolutely hostile or not even in alignment with what it actually is, right?
mm,
And
mm,
human beings are the same way. We learn, and the reason that we are still here as a species is because we learn from those pieces that kept putting us in danger. So that survival strategy is so embedded inside of us that it runs continuously because we're adaptive creatures. We learn by habit and we learn by adapting. And as the adaptation happens, then what happens? What happens genetically? The genes change,
mm,
right?
mhm,
So if we live in colder climates, the genes change so we can be able to tolerate colder climates. And then over generations, then oh, we might grow more hair on our bodies to protect us from the cold climate. So those are the kind of
mhm,
things that happen, right? And so we're shifting that survival strategy to make it more in some ways aware, cognizant of what's going on, and going, well, wait a minute, I'm not in danger. The saber-toothed tiger is not about to pounce on me, even though it feels that way. And what is the feeling that's driving that? Some kind of anxiety about my going through my day or the traffic that I have or the boss that is yelling at me or the spouse or the kids or whatever this is. It's all driving this behavior that really is present moment, but actually coming from that old space, that survival strategy.
wow. And so, James, what would you say would be the ultimate in being able to thrive? What would it truly take to thrive? Is there a
Commitment and
way out of
awareness.
this?
Commitment and an awareness.
Commitment and an awareness.
You know,
Mm.
if we took this back to when we talked about Ho'oponopono the last time, right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
And so we talk about pono, right? And pono is living in right action. Pono is living in integrity inside ourselves,
Mm.
right? It's recognizing the places in our lives where we are not in alignment. Energetically, spiritually, harmonically, we're not in alignment. And to recognize that and go, wow, I'm recognizing that in this moment, in this situation in my life, I'm not in alignment. What do I do to now to move out of that, right?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And so awareness is always the first key because you don't know what's wrong until you realize it's wrong. You don't know anything's awry until it's awry. So
Right.
you're looking at that, and then once you realize it, once you go, oh my God, I've been doing this thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes this piece that shows up all the time. The interesting thing is the awareness usually though takes us into this negative place, and the negative place is self-judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's to be able to watch what's happening, recognize what's going on, not go into self-judgment, because I know that for me, there's lots of times where I find out that I'm doing something that's not right or wrong, however you want to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing I do is chastise myself for not realizing that I was doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That's the loop. That's part of the
Yeah.
loop.
Yeah. And it's transmuting that shame and self-judgment with compassion.
Compassion or
That's
just
how we rise
awareness.
above it. We
Yeah.
need
And just
compassion
kind of look
for
at that.
that. What we become aware of. Yeah.
The way that I helped myself to move through that is when I saw the things that were happening, to slowly teaching myself not to go straight into self-judgment, to look at that and go, wow, there I there I am. Wow, that's amazing, James. Look at what you're doing. And there's no judgment inside that. It's just an awareness of
Yeah.
catching me and going like that. And then sometimes I laugh at myself and says, do you really want to do that again? And there's a part that goes, no. And so cool. So what can we do besides this? And
Mm-hmm.
so it takes that kind of pulling everything that's been automated out and then moving through those spaces. But first is awareness, and
Mm-hmm.
then the commitment goes, wow, I'm not comfortable doing the things that I was doing anymore. So I'm making a commitment to change. And you have to remember, so go back to neuroscience, right?
Mm.
So the neurosynaptic connections, if we do something over and over and over, that neurosynaptic connection gets thicker and thicker. The bundle gets thicker because
Mm-hmm.
the nerves kind of come together to help create the information moving faster, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so there's where the pattern gets embedded. That's the science of the pattern getting embedded is those neurosynaptic connections, right? So once we realize that, does it mean that the connection breaks? No, the connection's still going to be there and it's
Mm-hmm.
still going to run a run. So it's almost as if we got to abandon this road, this highway of information that we've had, and we got to go build another road someplace here that has the new process or the new thinking in there. And
Mm-hmm.
slowly deciding to come back to that new road, that new way of thinking. And the more we do, then slowly, and if I've actually watched this happen in videos that they've had where the neurosynaptic connections break apart and then they reconnect somewhere else. It's kind of like Avatar. Remember, like Avatar when they were
Yeah.
talking to
Yeah.
the tree, and it would go like that. It's the same thing,
Mm.
So I use a lot of analogy, and so that may be an analogy that people understand. So the pattern is a neurosynaptic connection, and as we create new patterns and those synaptic connections become stronger, the old pathway falls apart, and then
Mm-hmm.
eventually those synaptic connections break down. But that doesn't happen overnight. That takes time. You
Yeah.
have to build that road. You got to, you know, Livingston went to the jungle and then they had to cut the path. And then the path everybody kept going became this walking path where people could walk. And then, all of a sudden it was this dirt road. And then all of a sudden there were cars and there were vehicles or wagons. And then it was wide enough so that people could pass each other. That's kind of how it's happening in your brain
Mm.
is that process of building in that way.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense. It makes sense. And Yes, with the clarity comes new choices that we can make. It strengthens consciousness, it expands conscious awareness, and allows us to extend that to others as well. Just operating in a new frequency, operating in a new vibration, operating from our truth now as well. That creates
Not only are
natural
we, I'm,
consequences.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt.
that's fine. Hmm.
Um, Not only are we operating from that truth, and not only are we operating from that new place inside of us, but what's happening is that we start to radiate that energy. So we're talking about
Yes,
energy, right?
exactly. Hmm.
And as I am able to embody that energy inside of me,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
start to radiate this energy around me. And then the people around me go, "Oh, wow, what have you been doing, James? You look different. Something's happening." And there's this place. So the transmission of that new thought or that new form of being
Hmm.
moves outwards because we're radiating that. And then other people, again, now we're talking about boundaries, right? But in a different way. Other people feel that energy and they kind of gravitate towards it, or they go, "Oh, well, what is that? That feels really good. I'd like to have that." And so in that way, then we start to initiate change,
Exactly.
literally
Hmm. Hmm.
by just being ourselves.
Yay. Beautiful. And so, James, what if people need a little help? What if they'd like to connect with you and may have some questions or some comments or want to explore a little bit more and discover a little bit more about who they are? How would they reach you? How can they connect with you?
If you haven't been on my website before and you go to www.jameskawainui.com, there's going to be a pop-up window that's going to say and a place that says, do you want to talk to James? There's a part in there, and you can reach out and I'll have a conversation with anybody that reaches out that says, "Hey, I'd like to talk about this." And you know, one of the ways that I work with people is we have to build a bond and a trust. And so that initial
Mm,
phone call creates that relationship. And then from there, we talk about some of the things that are going on and if there's things that I feel like I can help you with, I will. If there's people that I know that would do a better job, I do that as well. So it mostly it's looking at yourself and going, wow, I really want to change and realizing, and this is true for all of us. I'm sure that's true for you. I have the people that I go to for help
mhm.
because there are just things that we cannot see for ourselves.
Yeah.
And that outside guidance or that outside perspective always helps to, in some ways, show us things that we may not be able to recognize for ourselves. And in that way, then create that guidance. I was talking to somebody about a week ago, and I said, when you first start out on that journey and you're aiming, you think that you're going this way. And I said, at the beginning, if you're 1 degree off, it's not that big deal. But if you get, if Columbus was a degree off when he left Spain, right? Would he
Mhm.
have hit the Americas? Maybe not. It would have been way different than that. So if you think about it, and if you think about you trying to fly to the moon or you're trying to launch a satellite into orbit, that 1 degree off could make the difference between success or failure. So it's about being able to realize that we may just be off course just a little bit and just might need some,
Yeah.
the reset or
The reset.
bringing back
Realignment.
into
Hmm.
alignment,
Coming back into our center, absolutely. And making sure that we are on the right path, we're taking the right action. And that's not right as in a place of perfectionism or a certain level of standard. No, it's not that. It's being right as in being true, being authentic, being
and,
real,
and
and
being in
fully
alignment.
supported in that. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so we'll have links to connect with James, all of you that are tuning in right now in the description below. Speaking of direction, I also created this beautiful guide. I've been hearing a lot of great feedback on the Sacred Leaders Compass. So if you're looking for that and to discover more about who you are and where things might have gotten out of alignment and what steps to take next, that's all available in the Sacred Leaders Compass that you can download for free as well. And that link will be in the video description as well. James, Thank you so much for being here so we can
I know
unpack a little
I
more
can't
and now there's new
I,
questions. And I know we'll be back again. So let us know.
I
Give some
cannot believe
sign.
how time goes when you and I sit together.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And the time goes by. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, yeah, audience, if you're finding that you're enjoying this conversation too and you'd like to hear more of it, we'll bring James back. So give us a thumbs up, share it. There might be some interesting insight that you'll uncover as you maybe listen to it again or go through it. And the other video too, where we explored the true meaning of Ho'oponopono. You'll find that. Today we spoke a little bit more about the pono of the Ho'oponopono. So grateful for that and looking forward to seeing what comes next for you, the audience, for you, James. And I know for myself, I've changed for the better through this conversation. So thanks again. Thank you so much for being here, James.
Blessings to everyone. I'm so grateful to just have the opportunity to sit and talk with you. And if you take anyone takes something away, just one thing today that helps them go, then I think we did our job.
Yeah. Thumbs up to that. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Awaken and Ascend. Until next time, bye for now.
Aloha.